Good evening. I'm Councillor Haug and I'm the chair of the South Area Committee meeting. Welcome to tonight's meeting. We have received apologies only from Councillor Macpherson. So let's just quickly see who is present. The city councillors should be myself, Councillor Lee, Councillor Ashton is there, Councillor Davies is there, Councillor Dryden, probably still on his way, Councillor Flaubert, on her way, Councillor Levine is there. Apologies from Councillor Macpherson, and Councillor Young is there. And welcome to your first South Area Committee meeting. You should see some pre-live information in the chat, just in case you've missed that. We also have officers at the table, the Area Committee Lead Officer Dave Prinsep, Committee Manager James Goddard, and Meeting Producer Boris Herzog. Welcome to the whole team. I will also post, let's see if that works. There's some more text now in the chat for everybody who is attending. I think it should be self-explanatory. Just be civil with each other, and we will get this meeting smoothly to the end. So we can move on to the agenda item 2, unless anyone has already any comments at this stage. Does anyone have any declarations of interest to make? Silence probably means no, so we can move on to agenda item 3, and that's the notes of the meeting from the 6th of March. Can you please let me know if there are any issues with those minutes? Okay, in this case, silence probably means approval. Note that we can't really approve minutes because we're not a decision-making committee. And that means there's agenda item 4, any matters and actions arising from the minutes. I can report, as you probably remember, we didn't have any police officer present in the last meeting, so they did not show up without sending apologies. So I got in touch with them and explained to them that that's not really the way we would like to do this, but it turned out they have just had a change in the area. The area officer has just changed, so there is a new area officer, and we recently met with him, and he is very happy, or he will be very happy to meet us in the September meeting and submit a report. So I think that's good news.
Could we just name him, Councillor, please?
It's Sergeant Kevin Sutcliffe. I'm sorry, yeah.
That's just for the minutes as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry to barge in. But...
Is there anything else? Mr. Rising, for example, anything maybe to consider for the next meeting, South Area Committee meeting, for example, when the police is present? Councillor Slatter.
Sorry, I haven't seen my hand thing. To do with the police, we're certainly very concerned in Trumpington about cycle theft and cycle security. So we were wanting to have a particular focus on that. We will try and bring something to the meeting ourselves because we want to do some research during the summer on what are the options to make things safer. We're well aware, and I'm sure this is true across the southern area. I'm sorry that Russ Macpherson's not here because I know he, as community safety guy, is also concerned, but I'm sure we can all join together in our concern. We'll try and bring some details and see what we can put our heads together and make some progress, because it's damaging in so many ways if people lose their bikes.
Yes, I agree, and I think we will let Sergeant Sutcliffe know, and so that he can prepare for this already. And anyone else, of course, who has anything related to this, please let me know ahead of the next meeting so we can make this as productive and constructive as possible. Thank you, Councillor Slatter. Anything else on minutes arising? Yes, otherwise we can move on to agenda item 5, and that's the open forum. So we've received 5 questions, if I'm correct, and I should say some of them, I think 3 of them were submitted probably only today, which means officers probably or councillors didn't necessarily have much time to prepare for them. Just to manage expectations, but obviously they will be on the record. So officially we have about 30 minutes for these items, but of course that's at the discretion of of the chair. So shall we start with question number 1? Imogen, is Imogen present? And I was told that if Imogen is not present, then potentially Councillor Beckett might read this question, but I think he is not available either.
I am here, Chair, but I have to admit I do not have the question to hand, but I believe Democratic Services had it, that they said they could read it out as well.
Okay, maybe, yeah, can we do that, please? Or should I maybe just copy and paste it in the chat as well?
I could share my screen if you want, Chair, and or read it.
You know, sharing screen sounds like the right thing to do.
If you'll bear with me, I'll just make sure I'm sharing
Absolutely.
the right sharing the right bit. I'll more than happily read it, but it might be easier to show it on screen.
Yeah,
And
maybe briefly.
I have all 5 questions as needed, Chair.
Okay, fantastic. So it's about, I'm assuming it's Queen Edith's. So apparently there's potentially a rise on ongoing antisocial behavior as well as a decrease in activity of various sorts. So I guess the idea is potentially whether these two are related. I mean, Councillor Beckett, did you say that you might be able to say something about this issue, or?
No, I think it's more of a city council issue with it being antisocial behaviour. I know they've put in some LHI bids, which we're waiting to hear about to help with some of it. And I know they've also been working with the biomedical campus. Some of it, I noticed Councillor Davies has a hand up though, so I'll defer to her.
Okay. Over to, yeah, sorry if I put you on the spot there. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, so I think this is more by way of a rhetorical question, pointing out that some CCTV has in the last month been put in at the junction of Red Cross Lane and Greenlands. And I know from conversations with IMI how much of a positive contribution Red Cross Lane residents and Greenlands residents feel it's making towards reducing antisocial behaviour in the area. So I think that's probably by way of a thank you to the ASB team for helping make that happen.
Thank you. I mean, that's noted then. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Okay, Councillor Young. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. So is this a CCTV camera that kind of moves around? Is there a chance of keeping it there? I mean, what do people, is that something we need to ask officers?
So shall I come back on that, Chair? I
Yes, please.
believe
Also.
it is a temporary installation in the first instance. I would imagine that the residents who have been plagued by antisocial behaviour there will be now pressing their case to make it permanent. I don't know what scope there is for doing that, but that certainly seems to be their intent from what I've taken away from conversations.
Chair,
Yeah.
can I come in there as well to say I don't think it's provided by the City Council. It's actually the hospital, I believe, that has added it into their CCTV due to some of the behaviour that was caused by the hospital site.
Oh. Right.
Councillor Dryden.
Thank you, Chair. Just for information, a few years ago in Sheraton High Street, where we had a temporary camera, mobile camera, and we wanted it all the time, the Residents Association collected money from different sources of the area, and we paid for our own camera to be fitted in the High Street, which the council do look at. But we initially paid for the camera, so that's one idea you could go to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Young.
Yeah, is it still there, and how much did it cost?
It is still there, and it cost us, I think it was just over £17,000.
£17,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our business has helped us as well. Tesco's and some other business on the high street. Obviously, where you are, it's not so commercial, so it's more difficult, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Slatter.
Yeah, I think it would be really useful to have in the minutes about what we've got now at Greenlands Red Cross, who's paid for it to be put in and who's monitoring? Because if it is an extension of the hospital CCTV, it would sound like something relatively simple to carry on with that system if that is having a good effect. Because we know that it's quite a performance to get any added to the police system or any others. So perhaps we could have it on record, our appreciation of the hospital providing it, and that may even help it to stay, I don't know. But it would be very useful to have it on the record. It's help, like Rob Dryden has put in, we've done these things before. They're always a bit different, and it's useful to know what we've got and who's looking at it particularly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, okay. I mean, in the interest of time, with 5 questions, I would just, I mean, if we all agree it's a good thing. But I mean, then again, if you have a last comment, Councillor Young, that's...
Well, I think we need to try and find out if it's such a good thing, how can we keep it going is the question. So who can respond on that? Can they go away and find out? Is that James Goddard?
I mean, I guess I could then send the question to a relevant officer. I mean, or is this the ward councillors who would like to take this on? Does anyone volunteer? Councillor Davies?
Chair, seeing as I've already been talking to Red Cross Lane Residents Association, would you like me to dig a little deeper and find out what's going on and feedback?
That would be highly appreciated, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In that case, I suggest we move on to question 2 by Hannah Pettit. I mean, I've just seen her around, I think. Hannah, are you there?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am. Thanks.
Hello,
Zola.
very nice. Thank you very much for joining. Yeah,
Thank
can I
you.
just say at the beginning, it's a very long question. Would you like maybe to summarize it? Because we also, just for the benefit of everyone else, it's been suggested that this is more relevant for the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee meeting, which will meet on the 29th of June, if I'm not mistaken. And there is the item on dog control, or the new PSPO on dog control measures in there. And yeah, this is what this question is referring to. So, I mean, I'll leave it to you, Hannah, to summarize or present your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Olaf. I'll do my best. So yeah, I had quite a few questions within the email that I submitted, but the one that I wanted to focus on, because I felt it hadn't been covered. So if you look at an aerial view map in Hobson's Park area, you can quite clearly see the paths that have been carved out of the grass areas from where people are walking through, either by themselves or walking their dogs. So I felt, along with quite a few other residents in the area, that having this dogs on lead only rule imposed on us wasn't the best course of action, and that maybe consideration for erecting fences around certain areas of the park to protect the ground nesting birds and other wildlife would be more appropriate. So I just wondered if that is something that could be considered, and I don't know if there's any proof that has been strongly considered, instead of kind of giving a blanket rule across the park of dogs on lead throughout the nesting season.
Yes. I mean, I can only say I'm a member of the Environment and Scrutiny Community Scrutiny Committee meeting, but at the moment I only know that they are looking into it. So we will get the papers on the probably a week before the Scrutiny Committee meeting. So when they might publish a proposal there. I don't know if Wendy Johnston is already present. I think she is at least on the scheduled later for the environment report. But I mean, it's certainly an ongoing discussion, and I've already sent several emails to relevant officers. I mean, to make sure they look at these at these options. I mean, at the moment, I can't say anything more. I don't know if anyone else on this committee has more information. I mean, the question is clearly whether the proposed measures will actually have an effect or the desired effect. It will clearly be detrimental to, the health of the dogs, that they need their exercise. And of course, lots of dog walkers would like to let their dogs off lead. So we have to balance this with protecting wildlife. and other issues. There were some reports of dog attacks in the area. Dog fouling, of course, is always a topic. But yeah, the question, of course, is whether the proposed measures would really address that. So I think at the moment we can only say the question is on record, and I think you've made some very good points there that hopefully will be addressed at the committee.
Thanks, Olaf.
Yeah, James, your hand's up.
I mean, it says that Wendy's on mute, but in the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I would leave it, I mean, to her to speak now if she's around. But
Hi,
I mean,
Chair, I'm happy to add to that if you want me to.
yeah, that would be great. That would be fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy.
So obviously the papers for the committee will come out on the 19th, so next Monday, when you'll have access to the full report that's going to committee. Just to say that we have considered all of the consultation responses we received, but obviously I'm not able to give any detail at the current time as to what the final conclusions have been drawn are, but more than happy to revisit this question at the committee if the paper doesn't answer the questions that are raised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that sounds good. I would even say promising. Is that okay, Hannah, or would you like to follow up on that?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. In that case, we can move to question 3. I mean, James, would you please put it on the screen? It's by Amanda Nielsen, and I think I saw her name.
Yeah, happy to, Chair. I think Ms.
I
Nielsen
think I saw her name in somewhere in the participant list. Amanda, are you around?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, fantastic. Would you like to ask your question in person? I mean, online?
Yep, that's fine. So Philippa will have heard this before when she's attended the Trumpington Residents Association. But my question is really what is going to be done about the lack of enforcement of the ANPR camera through the biomedical campus? So to give you some context, there were 0 tickets issued in the period September 21 to August 22. However, the period September to November 2022, there were 195 enforcement notices to drivers. This was very evident in chat in local social media sites where people were shocked that they didn't know, despite all the signage, and clearly is a route that Cambridge residents misuse on a very, very regular basis. What's quite disappointing is that now for the period December 2022 to February 2023, only 14 notices have been issued. And clearly we know that people are regularly running through the site. So I really just wanted to know what is going to be done to ensure that this planning condition is upheld, basically.
Okay, Councillor Slatter.
You're on mute.
Sorry, everybody. Yeah. I was just wanting to speak in support of this, because right from the beginning, we were looked at strangely, Zan Kent and I in those days, that we wanted there to be a limit on what went along Addenbrooke's Road. And I think people have realised now there's quite enough traffic needed by the hospital without making extra. But Ms. Nielsen is well aware, because she lives and looks out at it and hears it, of the speeding as well. So I just wanted to chip in, as company councillors will know, this was an issue raised with the new police guy, Kevin, in terms of just warning that we wanted to lower the speed limit on Addenbrooke's Road as well. It's only a related issue, but I just wanted to chip this in to get it on the minutes, because it's both the rat running through the site, which is clearly bad for the site, but also the speeding along that road, which was not built for either racing or for through traffic. And they have raised this with the police, and I hope we can pursue this, because otherwise there are people taking trouble not to go through the Addenbrooks and other people chancing it and getting away with that, and that is never a good look. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slatter. So can I just confirm, so you just volunteered to follow this up? So the the meeting notes will say that you are going to follow this up.
Yes, I was saying we've already followed it up because we did
Okay.
hear about it in the Trumpton Residents Association meeting. As you and I know, we raised it with the police, and we do need to follow it up. I would be interested to know what other councillors think, because this is a good forum just to flash out any other opposing views. We don't want to pretend a unanimity isn't there. See, Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, Councillor Ashton is next. He is on mute. He is still on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Enforcement in the South area is an ongoing problem, Chair, across all the districts regards problems of parking on double yellow lines, speeding, and I think it's an item that, in a sense, the councillors get asked about, but the resources we're given to enforce it is clearly not enough. And I think, being as you've spoken to the police about turning up at these committee meetings, it's essential they do, so that they can face the public and hear firsthand why the public are so concerned. Because the public then say to us, what are you doing about it? So we keep raising it, and we want the police now to show themselves and explain fully why they can't enforce when they brought matters in. And Cherry Hinton, for example, on Mill End Road, the cars are backing out onto the high street, and how somebody has not been knocked over yet, we don't know. And we've kept asking. We did get a slight improvement, but it is an ongoing thing across the whole South area that the police need to really get to grips with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Amanda, would you like to come back on that?
I just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Slatter on picking up the speed. Just to put that into context, there's a gentleman on the campus side of Shelford Road to define the two sides of Addenbrooks Road, and he has calibrated speed equipment, and he's recorded the highest speed of 72 in a 30 zone. I, as Councillor Slatter will know, don't like living where I live. It is horrible, quite frankly. I have a lovely house and a little allotment and everything else, but the traffic noise, the noise pollution, the speeding, the blaring horns, the running the red lights, the cutting each other up, using the central hatching as its entire lane to race the lights against it. It is pretty grim on Addenbrooks, as I call it, racetrack, and just nothing gets done about it. There was one week of police enforcement, and I think that might have been 2019 or the very beginning of 2020. I can't recollect. And under a Freedom of Information request, they don't have the data. But on average, their response was drivers were keeping in the limit, which is really pretty poor response. And thanks for your comments as well, Councillor Ashton, because it's nice to know we're not alone, but it's not good news either way.
No, we are sorry to hear that, of course. I mean, we'll keep it on the agenda for as long as it takes. And as you've heard, I mean, our county councillor will take this forward. So maybe we can keep you in the area for a little bit longer. Okay, Councillor Beckett. Sorry, I missed that. Councillor Beckett, please.
That's all right. I was just saying, I'm not actually sure this is a police enforcement one with this camera. From what I understand, it's private land, and it was put in there as a planning condition on the Addenbrooks site, and therefore it's run. Sorry, Phil's got a hand up. She might be able to confirm that it is police. I thought it wasn't. Councillor Slatter, sorry, do you want to jump in?
Yes, you're right. It was put in as a part of the planning insofar as the speed limit on Addenbrooks Road itself was obviously the general highway, but through the hospital it is private and they have the right to do it. But it did take a long time, and I think there are people on the TRA who can probably give us the chapter and verse insofar as getting the police over a period of years to actually acknowledge it was something that should be enforced.
So do you mean speeding, Councillor Slatter, or do you mean the access through the Addenbrooks site?
The access through. I thought that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I was. I was just checking.
I
you
don't
weren't
think
talking about
speeding through the site is that much of an issue, which is one good thing out of this. But it's speeding on Adderbrooks Road, and it's the rut running through the site.
I wasn't sure if there's anything that could be done on the planning side of things from our city councillors, that if it was a planning condition, whether there is any scope to pick it up with planning there. I know there's actually a similar situation in the Beehive Centre, that there was a rising bollard that was meant to be put in and was a planning condition, which has now failed and has now anyone can go through. But I don't know personally what can be done about those planning conditions when they're breached further on down the line.
I think maybe if our chairman could write to David Plank of the TRA, he will supply chapter and verse. Can I pass the buck to you on that one, Councillor Haug?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it is just a matter of them telling us what has happened in the past and what is now the situation. But as far as I know, it is now been acknowledged that it is something that has been gone through the process of law. It should be enforced. Thank you.
We just write this down. Okay. Okay. So Councillor Slatter and Councillor Haug to to build a team to follow this up. Amanda, is this still your old hand, or you would like to?
Just a quick one. In summary,
Sure.
it's obviously very complex on the biomedical campus for tenants, long leaseholders, ownership, and all the structure that comes with it. But the crux of it is a couple of management companies and an owner that are predominantly involved and should be providing this data to the police to then carry out the enforcement of tickets. And that's a company called Prologis, Prologis, and another one called Kings Hill Management. So whether the failure is in them not providing the data to the police, we're not sure where it's breaking down, but to go from 195 down to 14 is quite significant when we know it's happening on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, no, I hope that the South Area Committee meeting can really help do something significant about this. But if there are no further comments on this particular issue, then thank you very much for everybody who contributed to this, and especially Amanda for raising this here at the committee. And we can move on to question number 4, which is by Anthony Carpen, who I don't think is present in this meeting. And I also see there are notes that he is already expecting an answer from officers. Is that correct, James?
What I've done, Chair, is I passed Mr. Carpen's question on to officers. As it came in this afternoon, I think they will have to respond after the meeting, but I was just going to share it.
Yeah, just for completeness. Considering
I will share it as soon as, sorry, the wrong document turned up. There we go.
Yeah, so it's about the junction, and I don't know much about that, and whether residents could be involved more and get leaflets, for example, about certain events. Because I mean, the question was also submitted quite late, and if it has already been passed to the relevant officers, then maybe we can provide the answer at the next meeting.
Yes, can do, Chair.
Thank you. Which leads us to question number 5, which is by James Hems. Actually, 2 questions. And James, you're obviously around. Would you like to ask your questions, please?
Sure, I just need to bring them up. I wasn't sure if I'd got in time. I think the first one I recall, which is probably simpler, is on Whittle Avenue, for those that are familiar with the Trumpington area around Addenbrooks Road. There is an apartment building that was damaged, I think, nearly 18 months ago from one of the gales. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
Building work started after 12 months, but in the last week there has been no activity on the building. And I just wanted to raise that to the attention of the ward councillors to potentially get in touch with building control to find out when the anticipated completion of works might be, because the guttering is still broken. That could be 2 years now with no guttering, for example. So that's question 1. And I'm not sure if there's anything that you might know from building control at this point, or planners.
I certainly don't, but Councillor Slatter has her hand up.
Yes, obviously I went round when it happened because it was really quite scary. They did make it safe, but it's still in a state of limbo. I had a word with one of the guys working on it when they did come back and put some scaffolding up, because I welcomed him back. And he appeared to be thinking it was going to be started, continued and finished, but I take the point, the scaffolding is still there. I have email addresses for residents who were involved. One of the issues is, of course, as James knows, there are 2 different owners of one block, and that really makes for fun and larks with the insurance. What I think I might do, if that's right with James, is just to ask the residents what they know. I'm not sure that it is a matter of building control, but it is a matter that they should be getting information about. And I think it's only courteous to ask them first. And I'm happy to feed that back. If he's just expressing general concern, I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear it.
That would be certainly helpful, I suppose, because although not in the block is very close proximity to a number of other properties. Should the scaffolding or anything happen in the meantime, could become affected. So some of the scaffolding goes onto the pavement and the recycling bins, for example.
Okay, thank you. But are you satisfied by Councillor Slatter's response, or Councillor
Yes.
Slatter, you would like? Yeah. But Councillor Slatter, you are still planning to say something else, or is the hand still on? Okay, so in that case, you have a second part of your question. Is that basically about the dog control as well?
Yes, slightly different, which is helping with my understanding, and then potentially anyone else's, how the next step happens. So it's going to a report and going to the committee. What does that necessarily, is that then a decision is made and then that gets written in stone, or is that kind of still the start of a process? And I don't know if that's probably better put to Wendy or yourself, Olaf, as a committee member.
I mean, Wendy might know for sure. I mean, as far as I understand, yes, the scrutiny committee will vote on the plan to extend the PSPO, and then the full council will still have to affirm that. But then this, for 3 years, this public space protection order would be in place if voted for at the meeting. But I can see that Wendy put her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. So what happens is this report goes to the Environment and Security Committee on Monday. If the decision is approved by committee members, that means in essence that is the final version of the order. If there need to be made any amendments, we can always be asked to review, do further consultation as required. But if there are no disagreements and everyone is happy with it as it's set out in the paper that goes, that comes out next Monday, then once it's approved, that is then sealed by our legal team and would come into effect from October 2023. But if there are any concerns or changes that need to be made, they can be made at the committee by members. If not, then as I say, it's signed off as it is. Thank you.
Yeah, just clarify, not everybody will have to be happy, but the majority will have to be happy. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yes.
And on that, thank you very much, Wendy, for that. It's helped to better understand sort of that's the final chance. So ahead of that, I think particularly to the collective councillors that represent different parties and different wards, I think the piece, I'm just going to say 2 pieces really on it, which is the consultation statement says it was to renew the order on problematic dog control. And evidence that the antisocial behaviour related could not be stopped without a PSPO. But I have raised to the committee that there are a number of alternative approaches that could be taken by the same enforcement team. And on top of that, it mentions that the city could not manage without the PSPO being put in place. The City Council website then says the purpose of the PSPO is to enable the community to address specific dog control but it's not intended to unduly restrict dog owners from responsibly exercising their dogs across the city. And one of the statements, obviously, the problematic state of affairs. Now, Olaf did state about a dog attack. That was actually me. And it was one individual that is known to police as for a number of various reasons. Obviously, it's not my place to say for what, but it's notable that that one dog attack that could have happened anywhere because of the irresponsible owner rather than anything else is reported 3 times in the Freedom of Information Act, of which there are only 9 reports of anything in total. And the last report is in February of 2022. So it kind of goes against the notion that it's problematic and that it is out of control, such that a PSPO is the only thing to help change this. That on top of its own mention within the proposal document ahead of consultation of the actual numbers of dogs, the numbers of birds, the numbers of predatory animals, etc. And yeah, and I think I will obviously need to take this to the scrutiny committee, but I think it's felt important enough to raise to the attention of the kind of South Area Committee and ward councillors.
Yes. No, I mean, thank you very much. I don't know if Wendy would like to come back to that, but obviously at the scrutiny committee meeting, these are exactly questions that we will have to ask. I mean, what can we compare these numbers with? At what point does it become a concern or even dangerous? And also, will these measures really change something? I mean, because any regulation is only as good as the enforcement that can be used to actually put them into practice.
Yeah.
And there might, of course, be the irresponsible people will continue being irresponsible, and the responsible ones who are not really the problem will just see that the others will get away with it. So yeah, but I think this is exactly what we need to discuss at the scrutiny committee meeting, and it's really great that we are having, I think, this discussion, and also Hannah's question contained a lot of information. And I wonder whether there are any proposals already being discussed on making Hobson's Park in particular sort of a bit like in Trumpington Meadows, where you have some area where dogs can run around freely and other areas are protected, or where the wildlife is protected. I mean, is this something that would be possible in Hobson's Park? I mean, I don't know if we can answer this question now, but I mean, this is obviously a question for the scrutiny committee. I mean, Wendy, would you like to come in on that? I mean, I'm happy. I mean, if you say that we should wait for the scrutiny committee, that's also fine, of course.
I mean, there is very little I can say about obviously the proposals and the results of the consultation until the papers actually come out on Monday. The only thing I would say is obviously the important thing to remember about the PSPO is that it has been in place since 2017. Obviously, it's been subject to a review in 2020. Without the PSPO, it would in essence make leaving dog poo, leaving dog mess, not an offence. It would be perfectly legitimate to do that within Cambridge. So there are important factors that need to be considered when we look at the PSPO as well. Some pivotal points that need to be included. But again, James, it will kind of more than happy to answer these at the scrutiny committee and discuss them. Just very difficult at this time because the papers are not available publicly, so I can't discuss anything in great detail about the proposals or the results of the consultation, I'm afraid.
I mean, I would say, I mean, both Hannah and James, I mean, I'm assuming on behalf of the wider community have made their points. And I think we should obviously look at the report when it comes out. Happy to discuss it as well ahead of the meeting. And maybe we can then think potentially about making suggestions or amendments where necessary. Is that okay, James?
Yes, sorry. Just to clarify, Wendy, were you saying that dog fouling is not an offence without a PSPO?
That is correct, yes. Within Cambridge, because each council has to create a PSPO, or previously to the PSPO, there was what was called a dog control order. If those are still in place, those are still relevant. But if a council has elected to do a PSPO for dog control, they do have to put in measures to control dog fouling. That's how it's dealt with now.
Understood. I think, yeah, I mean, I think you have the data about the percentage dog fouling considering that the number of reports from the FOI on dog fouling, and there's only 9 reports in total, of 3 of which are the same dog bite incident, which only means there's 6 reports in total, the last report in February 2022. So with due consideration, it being problematic. And there are also other means of addressing dog fouling, because it's obviously the individual human that would be restricted upon in some way. And a PSPO of Hobson's Park, I think we would highlight, is the query here. Given everything that's being spoken about, I can only speak for Hobson's Park. I don't know about the other areas. But thank you.
Okay, Councillor Slatter, maybe a final comment?
Yes, we do have comments about dog fouling elsewhere, and I think those can be dealt with independently. I mean, I look out upon a dog toilet in Baker Lane, and people are scrupulous about picking up the poo, and I am always grateful. And now we have a nice red pot for them to put it in on Hobson's Park. But it is a natural thing that the guts of the dog will catch up with them before they get to the park. But as long as they take the poo with them, I'm not sure about. Hannah mentioned providing bags. It's a possibility, but I really think that is part of what dog owners should provide. And I'm still very torn. I just wanted to make that clear, that I'm very torn between the needs of the birds and the needs of the dogs. And they're really, on Hobson's Park, big though it is, there is no clear area that you could cordon off, though possibly somewhere around the station could be considered as a bit of a reserve. And if indeed both humans and dogs were banned from that in the nesting season, that would be logical. At the moment, the nice big hoarding is making for some rather interesting sightings of birds that are now safe from dogs. Not safe from diggers, but that's an interesting little bit of sort of opportunistic research we could do. But I'm torn myself, and I'm sure we all are. We don't want to spoil the life of dogs, and nor do we want to lose the new birds. A tricky one.
I mean, maybe I can, okay, yeah, Hannah, I can see on this. I mean, I would just like to add, I mean, there are areas, of course, around Trumpington at least, where dogs can run around. I mean, I think, around Byron Square. I mean, it's the area north of Long Road. I forgot what it's called now. Recently, the BioBlitz took place there, and Trumpington Meadows has an area, which of course is sort of within walking distance, but maybe not the most convenient option for people who live close to Hobson's Park and have this nice park in front of their doorstep. But Hannah, please.
Thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of respond to you, Philippa. So there have been sightings of, again, it's of humans. I really think it's the human impact in the park rather than the dogs off lead. But people have been sighted fishing in the actual pond of the bird reserve. So they have deliberately gone through what were the temporary fences before the permanent wooden ones have now been erected. But they've gone through the ditch to actually set up and fish from the pond and take fish away from the pond. Yes, back in February and in September. I think I included the email. I haven't seen
any this year, but it's something to look out for.
Yes, in February this year. And also just that with the dogs on lead, there are quite a number of dog walkers that have walked their dogs on very extendable leads that must be at 8-10 meters plus. Even if dogs are on lead during nesting season, doesn't mean they won't necessarily wander into the areas that are restricted. I know that comes down to responsible owners, of which most people who walk in Hobson's Park are. But that is also something to take into consideration as well. So I would, I know it's a personal opinion, but having seen the setup in Trumpington Meadows, I think that would be an ideal scenario for Hobson's Park going forward. But thank you.
You could look at maps, Hannah. I'm not sure where we could do it like they can in Trumpington Meadows.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, obviously, that's something for the report that the officers are going to produce. We can only make sure that they've looked at these options and explain to us what they consider suitable. But I think we've now spent more than 30 minutes on the open forum. And I think it's been a very good discussion. So thank you very much for the residents who asked the questions and everybody who contributed to the discussion. Obviously, we are always available for to answer emails or online chats outside of this meeting. And I think now we can move on to item number 6. And we've warmed up Wendy already. So Wendy, would you like to take us through the environmental and waste report? For the environmental reports.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just highlight a few key points in the report, if I may, and then I'm happy to take any questions or comments that there are. So this report brings to the committee a summary of the activities in the 3 wards between December last year and May of this year. So starting with Cherry Hinton, really positive to see that we've had quite a few corporate groups able to work with us at Cherry Hinton Hall. We've undertaken quite a lot of work, starting to renovate some of the benches, undertaking care around some of the trees, and that is ongoing with other corporate groups that we have coming up in the coming months. Community Payback has also been in the south area. They've worked across all 3 wards. They now actually work in the south area every 4 months. So they have been able to do quite a lot of the pavement edging around some areas, which is an area of work that doesn't get done otherwise. So it's quite nice in areas where they've been able to widen the path to make it more accessible. We have had the enforcement team operating in the city. They have identified that Cherry Hinton High Street has been suffering with waste being dumped outside the shops by the litter bins on a frequent basis. So at the moment, they're trying to identify the responsible people so that we can take relevant action against those. We've also had several cases of dog control that have been investigated by the team as well. The PSPA breaches at Cherry Hinton Hall, where we've had people either not putting their dogs on lead in the nature reserve area or failing to pick up dog fouling. So patrols have been increased there to try and tackle that problem, identifying the key sort of times that this happens. A summary of Queen Edith. So again, the Community Payback team have been edging pavements, and they've also been litter picking in Queen Edith as well to support our operations team. The enforcement team have had quite a good number of fixed penalties. Unfortunately, they are from littering from a motor vehicle, which predominantly is cigarette ends chucked out of the driver or passenger window. The hotspots have been Wolfston Way, Hills Road and Mowbray Road. In the last 6 months, we've got 7 fixed penalties, which is quite a lot for a ward to have for littering from a motor vehicle. And then in Trumpington, the community engagement team have been working at Trumpington Recreation Ground with the tree team. So earlier in the year, they were able to undertake some tree planting with volunteers, and also to sort of restake the apple trees that have been putting there previously. Just to confirm the second paragraph of page 14 of the report, where it says Lammasland, it should have been extended to include Lammasland, Cofen, Newbit, all around that sort of area that this group worked to undertake some work on trees and benches. So apologies, that isn't very clear. The enforcement team have been dealing with quite a lot of fly tipping. The numbers are higher than we'd like in some areas. So particular hotspots have been Anstey Way, Vicarage Way and Glebe Farm Drive. They continue to patrol those areas to try and identify those responsible. We've had 6 stray dogs in the ward, which is quite a lot, but luckily 5 of those have been claimed by their owners, and 1 dog has been rehomed by Wood Green to a new family. And then apologies, on page 20 of the report there's a slight error where I believe that James has published a replacement table where one of the footnotes has corrupted the images that you can see, but to highlight that across the ward fly tipping has actually fallen compared to the same period last year, and then the needle numbers have increased compared to the same period last year. There was still 5 instances of needles found. There was a singular incident in February in Trumpington where 53 needles were removed from a garage, which accounts for the large volume compared to the same period in the previous year.
May I briefly interrupt, because actually the area, I think Gresham Road, it's not in Trumpington anymore. I mean, I think there are some references also Bateman Street and Gresham Road. I mean, they're not in Trumpington anymore. I mean, just so that they end up in the right statistics.
I do apologise. I think what's happened is our system wasn't updated when the ward boundaries changed, and we didn't notice straight away until we started to produce the report. So apologies. That would mean that the figures in Trumpington are obviously a lot lower than we put in that table. I mean, that's a really brief summary, Chair. I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments that anyone has about the report or about it.
Thank you very much. That's great as usual, Wendy. And Councillor Dryden has the hand up first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Wendy, for your report. I'm glad to see that community payback team has come back again. I know in Cherry Hinton we used to they used to come quite regular when we had one of our rangers used to be involved with them, and since we've got no rangers now, I wonder who actually works with them, because also I'm a JP, so I know from my end being a JP we use this system for payback to the courts. So that's one question. The other one, I just got today, but abandoned cars. You deal with that, do you? If I get hold of you or one of your colleagues in Cherry Hinton, we had one there about 4 weeks now, and the resident's been trying to report it, but it hasn't had no success. So thank you. That's it.
Yeah. Would you like to respond to that, or shall we go through the questions?
I'm happy to take all the questions and then respond afterwards, I think, Chair.
Okay, in that case, Councillor Young is next. You're muted. Seems to be a trend today, the heat.
Sorry. There seems to be really high numbers of fly tipping in various places. Do we have CCTVs, temporary CCTVs that we can put in those places? Quick question.
Yeah, if I could add to that question, there seem to be very clear hotspots in Trumpington in particular. And we've already been asked about CCTV in one area, Glebe Farm, and we were told there could be one, but then there was ownership of the lamppost. It was apparently an issue. But there are clearly spots I think that would benefit a lot from CCTV in Trumpington. Yeah, but sorry, I just jumped in there. Okay, Amanda.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying about the needles, because that was quite alarmingly high numbers without then the correlating locations and things. I'm on Glebe Farm, so I know well about the fly tipping. I regularly report, probably get multiple reports because there's quite a lot of us that comment on it. Just as Councillor Hauck just said about ownership, it's such an important thing that council understands where their ownership responsibilities are now. I know it's very, very challenging in the new development, but I had to have a lot of backwards and forwards conversations to get the city council to appreciate that they actually were responsible for areas in Glebe Farm. And they are actually responsible for the lights in the play areas, but not the lights on the road technically, because they're not yet adopted. But the lights haven't worked in one part of Glebe Farm for about 3.5 years. And I think it just wears everybody down, really, especially the council. They're clearly being let down by the contractors. But it is really important that I think the crew and everybody needs to be briefed of where their ownership actually does lie, because a lot of stuff gets missed. And then just really quickly, how do we promote things more of the environmental activities that are happening? So when there was the community clear up week day in the old part of Trumpington, most people didn't know until it was too late. We keep getting told that there's flyers and letterbox drops to all the people in the area, in the immediate area, not the wider Trumpington and new build area. I spoke to loads of people around Byron Square and Foster Road and Paget Road, and nobody'd received a flyer. There wasn't anything in any of the notice boards. So it maybe, I don't know, was it as a successful event as it could have been?
Okay, thank you. Okay, finally, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Wendy. 2 questions, if I may. One, continuing this theme about sort of ownership and responsibility. I know that a resident who's a wheelchair user and therefore has limited mobility called in about fly tipping in a particular location, which is very definitely owned by the City Council, and basically got fobbed off by the call handler, and I don't know what should have happened in that instance, but I think the impression she got was that it was up to her to go and deal with the fly tipping personally, which clearly was not the appropriate response. So maybe we could have a think about how those calls are handled. Secondly, I suspect in common with lots of other people moving around the area at the moment, we're seeing a lot of overhanging branches sort of protruding onto the pavements and the shared use path. Is it possible to issue some kind of broadly definitive statement about whose responsibility it is to get that addressed? Because I think that would be fairly universally useful.
I mean, if I can also jump in again, I think we had exactly this discussion last year when we talked, I mean, in particular about, you know, Trumpeton Road and then things like that. And it's becoming an issue again, I guess, potentially unavoidable. I mean, plants grow back, and if we can't cut them because of bird nesting season, but at least it should be clear then what can be done, what can't be done. But sorry, I'm going on again. Councillor Slatter.
Yes, I was actually going to write to you, Councillor Howe, to complain that one of my favourite plants, the cowpath, was being cut back from Trumpington Road only today as I went by. I wanted to complain. No, seriously, it's good. It does get done. But the odd household that has an overhanging bush, and if people don't feel able to say anything, I know that theoretically it's the council puts a card through, they give them a notice to cut it back, threaten to do it at, you know, the person's expense otherwise, and then get it done. There used to be little postcards, and here Rob Dryden and I do tend to come back with, oh, well, this is what we used to do, and you could just put it through the door. And I do wonder whether some just a neighbourly, please could you put, you know, cut your hedge because it's hitting my gran in the face when I take her in the wheelchair. You know, it do up to open to suggestions, Sam, in terms of what can we do just as neighbours to prompt. It's quite easy not to realise your bush is over the pavement. Serious, my main one that I wanted to raise, though, I would absolutely agree with Councillor Dryden about the poor publicity, which could be a wasted opportunity when a lot of resources go into these community cleanups, and they do seem to come as a bit of a surprise. Now, given that they go in the diary, I believe months ahead, and every area has got some sort of local magazine and local councillors who could put a note in it, let's improve the publicity, because it's foolishness to have quite a lot of money spent on these events and then not to let anybody know about them. They seem to be quite a well-kept secret in some areas. So I wanted to agree on that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Third one, please. The dogs. Now we don't, as far as I know, have a dog warden. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy. Could we have an address to write to actually report when things happen? I do agree with Hannah and James that sometimes you get one report on social media and everybody thinks there's lots of problems. Let's encourage people to actually report properly when it does happen, and then we have a really true idea of the problem.
Wendy, are you sure you want to take all the questions in one go, or you would like to respond? Maybe that will answer some of the questions coming up.
Yeah, if I can come back on those ones that are raised, because I know there's a couple of questions that are coming back to the same message. So I'm quite happy to go back to those ones that have been asked so far, if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely fine by me.
Okay, so Councillor Dryden, community payback is still delivered by the community engagement team, which was the city rangers you talk about. This was the service they were formulated into. The work is now designed and developed by the community engagement officers directly with our operations team. So those people that are managing the street cleansing, the grounds maintenance teams, along with the community engagement officers, to come up with a schedule of works where it's most needed. We're more than happy for anyone to feed back into where they think appropriate. At the end of the report, you'll find your contact details for your operations team leader for the south, which is James. If you have any suggestions of where you'd like James to sort of task the community payback we're doing. We would be very happy to receive those suggestions. As I've said, they're in the city on a 4-monthly basis in the south. I think they were here in May, so they'll due back again October time. I think that works out. September time. So more than happy to take the suggestions. In terms of abandoning vehicles, yes, we do those. There is a web form on the internet that we ask all customers to complete, either themselves or by ringing the customer service centre, because there are specific questions we have to ask about abandoned vehicles. We can't investigate them unless they've been there for a minimum of 4 weeks, because people can go on holiday, things can happen. So 4 weeks is a minimum period that vehicles have to be stationary and unmoved before we'll investigate. But if they can go through the web form, it asks every single bit of information we need for an officer to be able to undertake an investigation. CCTV, Councillor Young. We don't currently have any dedicated cameras. We have to apply for what's called the redeployable CCTV cameras. There are, I think there are, don't quote my number, but I think there may be 6 or so for the city. We have to put an application in that competes with the police, for example. So if there are areas where they are needed for crime and disorder, they will often get prioritised over something such as environmental crime. We have been successful in having a couple of them. We had one at Cockerell Road, and we had another one at another location, Adam and Eve Street, fly tipping, where there wasn't a need for them at the time. So we can certainly put in an application if we feel there's a particular need. Those cameras are limited to being in location for usually a maximum of 3 months, which will often, if there's a behaviour problem, it will, in that time period, you can usually either catch people or it deters the behaviour enough so that they're not needed anymore. In terms of Glebe Farm Drive, there was an issue which the CCTV team advised on to do with the lamppost ownership, because it was still owned by the developer. For some, I don't know the technicalities, but for some reason they couldn't install a camera there at the current time. That application is still with the team for it to be deployed to, if they manage to resolve that, or it becomes the property of the county council. So that one is still on my list of areas I'd like to have a camera in, because it continues to be a problem, regardless of what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you. May I briefly jump in, because I realized actually Trumpington has clearly the most incidences of fly tipping on the list, but it has an equal number of fixed penalty notices compared to everybody else. So it looks like there's potentially a problem in Trumpington in particular with finding the culprits. So more incidences, but the same amount of fixed penalty notices. So I guess that should be higher, or not? The fixed penalty notices proportional to the incidents.
It depends on what we find. If you find a sofa dumped on the side of a road, it's very difficult to do anything without people stepping forward to give evidence. Whereas finding boxes and evidence is very different in terms of what action you can take. It depends what you're given, really, in terms of the evidence, what witnesses you have, what CCTV might be available as to what you can and can't do. And then there's certain legal tests you have to meet in order to be able to serve a fixed penalty as well. So the fixed penalties are obviously issued where those cases meet that test. In terms of the cleanup days, just to explain, there is a certain budget that we have to work with the cleanup days. City Homes also have a certain budget as well to run their own days, and we work jointly with the Shared Waste Service to try and deliver these days. The problem we have with finding them is to find the locations. We need an area of hard standing, or an area where we can park a refuse truck, put several skips for several hours, and kind of, with the city becoming more built up, there's some of those areas that we used to do these events on are actually sort of diminishing. So some of the locations we previously had run them, we're finding more difficult. We do publish for each event, we do 500 leaflet drops to all the residents in the area. We'd find, regardless of how often we do leaflet drop, people claim they haven't received it. It's an A5 postcard that clearly says clean up day on it. Often people pile it up with the junk mail and will dispose of it. Our officers do deliver, I say, 500 to most events. Some of the smaller events will deliver 250 to, but like the Byron Square one, for example, all of the roads around that whole area would have had it. We don't promote them widely past the kind of the areas we're trying to target, because we often have traders turn up trying to use the skips and then dispose of waste. We have people from outside those target areas coming along. Those areas are picked generally because we've worked in conjunction with Shared Waste and with our housing team to identify areas which will benefit from those. So at the present time, there isn't kind of the plan to kind of open them up to a whole ward, because if we had a whole ward's worth of residents turn up and try and do a clean up day, after about an hour we'd have to close the skips and remove them, because we only have so much space for each event. Once the refuse truck is full, once the skips are full, the event closes. So I do hope that we do promote them already. I do think there's some improvement though in perhaps notifying members sooner, so that members could obviously let their constituents know within the sort of target areas, above them, you know, to sort of remind people that the leaflets are on the doorstep. Maybe they've missed it, and we can provide electronic copies to yourselves so they can be distributed to those residents or groups that, you know, we may not know about or we may have missed. We do have there's a web page around our cleanup days. It's probably not the most publicised, but again, we try and target those areas with those residents rather than opening it up to the wider areas where there may not be as big a need. The areas are usually picked in addition to sort of identifying them where we have fly tipping problems, or where we've got ongoing issues where there might be a need for a cleanup day. So I hope that answers that sort of question, but I'm more than happy to revisit the way we publicise them if there are specific suggestions, without kind of opening it up to every single resident and targeting those in key areas. We actually don't plan too far ahead, because we have to work with the operations teams from the Shared Waste Service, and they don't always know about holidays and sickness, so we try not to do them sort of more than 6 to 8 weeks in advance. But again, that's never sort of finalised until 4 weeks ahead when the leaflets are sort of done. Councillor Davies, in terms of the fly tipping that was reported via customer services, I'd like to apologise to that resident, because that sort of behaviour is not what we'd expect. If the customer's got a query about fly tipping reported and wants to question the ownership, if they're not happy with what the customer service centre is saying, we would sort of always encourage them to raise it with us, either via email or to ask to speak to an officer. Every single fly tip that's reported to the council goes on our web form, whether it be the resident filling it in themselves or the customer service centre filling it in on a resident's behalf. Those jobs are sent to all the enforcement officers. They're the first ones that see them, so they will generally triage the cases and identify what cases they can pursue for investigation and which cases need removal. And if there are any questions about land ownership, we have access to the land registry. We have access to obviously all the mapping systems the council holds to be able to verify that. So I think on that occasion, it sounds like we failed that customer. So I'll feed back to the customer service centre that perhaps where there are examples like that, rather than kind of terminate a call or not deal with it in the most appropriate way, it might be wise to kind of just ask the question about ownership, just to confirm one way or another. And if it is that we can't deal with something, then maybe we need to provide that advice to the resident and direct them to where they might be able to seek advice or help from other than the council. In terms of the overhanging branches, it is the county council. The city council has no responsibility for sort of branches and vegetation coming from private properties onto the highway. The county council has an online reporting form, the same way as you report potholes and other highways issues, you can report overhanging hedges and branches. We do work with the inspectors for the area, and we will often card properties in conjunction with them. The little postcards that you've mentioned do exist still, but they're now the county council ones, which basically says you need to cut back your hedge within so many days, and they will then follow that up. I think it's so many weeks later, depending on what time of year it is and you know what sort of season it is, and they will then follow up, and if they need to take remedial action, they'll then do that in line with the legislation that they have available. So those postcards do exist. They just kind of, they don't say city rangers anymore, they do say the county council with the details of the inspector and you know, and you have to contact them if you have any questions. I will certainly raise about issuing a generic statement about how to report overhanging hedges. That's kind of sort of with the senior operations team, just to see if they feel appropriate with our communications team, how best to communicate that to residents so they know how to report them. And in terms of dogs, Councillor Satter, we have a web form as well for that. The web form we have for dog control is very specific because it asks specific questions we need to know from residents, and also it will direct them what cases we can deal with and what ones they need to refer to the police. So there are some, for example, we can't deal with where it involves a dog biting a person or attacking an assistance animal. Our response would always be, you need to contact the police in the first instance. We will support the police, but we are not the lead agency that deals with cases like that. Whereas if, for example, it's a dog regularly escaping out of a neighbour's garden, constantly straying in the street, absolutely that's something we can deal with. And it will go through asking questions about how often it's happened, are you willing to give a witness statement, what sort of information we need to be able to take an investigation rather than going backwards and forwards to residents. It is all on our web form, but you are right, we don't have a dog warden anymore. That's covered by our enforcement team who deal with, they're ward based anyway, so they are dealing with all the issues whilst they're out and about on their patrols, and they'll take the appropriate action as needed. But if anyone wants to write to write to us, they can send letters to the normal PO box address to the enforcement team, or likewise we have an email, EnviroCrime, which is our generic one, or again in the list of contacts at the end of the report you'll see that you've got your area officers. If you have any questions you can raise with them about cases that have already been reported. Those are the two officers to contact who will cover all of the South area. I hope that answers the question so far, Chair.
Thank you very much. I mean, that was great, and I think we can give you a little break while we ask a few more questions. I think Councillor Dryden is first.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and thank you again, Wendy. Like Philippa, I remember them cards pretty well. I might even have some still in my locker in my cabinet. But if it's a county council man, I mean, our rangers used to go with them as well, put them through doors. If we see anywhere we need, could our county councillor put a card through a door then, if it's county council responsibility now? And you go back to the the
Mind reader, Rob, I wrote it in the text in the chat. I think that we should, I mean, the county council really believes in local action and,
bring
local
back
things.
rangers, I say. Bring back the rangers.
We didn't get rid of them.
No, well, it's a long story. I'll do that offline.
I mean, Alan Baker invented them, and we thought they were brilliant. But there we are.
We will have a history lesson another time. Let's
Yes, well, I think you could take that one away yourself, Councillor Dryden.
I will.
Please do. I think they were very good, and they shouldn't have been stopped.
I do.
But I think in terms of county councillors having a card.
Payback. I'm glad that's coming back again. The only pity about in the south, though, we're not getting them back to September. But a lot of the work I could give to that payback is with overgrown areas, which September is going to be pretty hard to do. Again, when I had overgrown areas in Cherry Hinton, the ranger used to help there again. So, and I'll go back to my last point I brought up again about fly tipping with the cameras. One of the areas I was reporting a few times was an area where there isn't no street lights, so no electric. But I was watching a programme recently on television where some councils actually have these covert cameras that don't need electric, and they put them to catch the people fly tipping. And I wonder if our council can do something similar.
Thank you. Councillor Beckett.
Sorry about that, Councillor Hogg. That's actually an old one. I was going to answer the question about overgrown vegetation as well and say that there is very much a web form on the County Council's website, as Wendy said. And so if people can make sure that's filled in, that would be good. Our local highways officers do often go around as well and try and card people. But as everyone's aware, it is a big problem. But if people do spot it and they report it on the highways reporting website, that is always useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then it's Councillor Davies.
Yeah, sort of general observation, really. I suspect other councillors on the call are also finding that conversations that you would once have hoped would happen fairly naturally between residents are becoming more challenging because people perhaps don't know their neighbours as well or feel less confident than they might have done once upon a time to just go around and tackle things with them. I had a report last week of someone who was very frustrated because their neighbour was burning a rubber mattress in their back garden, generating thick black smoke. But the person who reported it to me did not feel confident to go around and kind of address it directly. And it's more of a kind of strategic question, I guess, is what do we think the council can do to be an intermediary in these situations? I think that the card system for the overhanging branches is quite helpful, but that's obviously not a way of addressing something that needs dealing with, in very short order. In the report about residents' views on the city and what they'd like to see, what they value and what they'd like to see change, that was published last week, there was quite an emphasis on enforcement. And it feels to me like all kinds of enforcement, parking enforcement, planning enforcement, environmental health enforcement, is something that's preoccupying residents more, possibly because they don't feel like they can then have the informal conversations they would once have had. And I don't know what an appropriate forum is to think through those issues, or whether work is already going on trying to pursue that. But it feels like it's quite pressing to me now.
Okay, then I have Councillor Ashton on the list.
Thank you, Chair. Wendy, a couple of things. One, I'm sure Councillor McPherson would have mentioned it. Church End, must have 6 garages down Church End now. One of them was notorious when it was near Tesco's on Newmarket Road, Regency Autos, who have a habit of leaving vehicles parked all the way along Church End, down Riley Way. Some of them look as though they're abandoned, because if you walk past them, they're covered in just bird poo, which has been on for months because you can't see the car properly. And they're down Riley Way as well. We get calls on a regular basis to say these cars are just causing enormous problems. Whose department does that come under? Because when we try and report it, we seem to end up going round and round and round. So is there one particular department we should be getting in touch with, rather than this shotgun approach? So that's one. And the other one is, I've been a resident in Cambridge for 52 years, and in 52 years in Cherrington, and I've never seen the grass as bad as it's been. And the number of complaints to ship from residents is unbelievable. I understand no more May on large areas, but on our recreation ground where children play, they couldn't play because the grass was so long. Where I live, there's 2 small areas. One was cut, one's been left, which is now covering the street sign. When I got in touch with Joel Carey to ask, has the policy changed, I was informed there's been no change of policy and our grass cutting remains as.
Sorry, am I the only one who can't hear? So, Councillor Ashton.
The grass. So they're the 2 questions. Thanks, Wendy. But thanks for all you do. I mean, you'd never have enough hours in a day and enough officers, I know, but thanks for all what you do.
Thank you. I mean, actually, Councillor Ashton just broke up a few times with me. I don't know if everything. Wendy, do you think you've got everything that you need? Okay, great. Then there is still James.
Is that me, James, or another James?
Yes. Sorry, yeah, you had your hand up.
Wendy, apologies. This is about dogs, but briefly, I wanted to understand a CPN, a community protection notice, because it seems to suggest on the LGA guidance that doesn't need a PSPO, but you could still issue fixed penalty notices, because you'd be referring to the ASB CP Act of 2014.
Thank you. I mean, okay, Councillor Beckett, is that now a real hand, or is that still the old hand?
Sorry, another phantom hand.
Okay. I mean, if I could still add a question to the list, I mean, I actually forgot to ask earlier about, could you provide an update on the herbicide-free trial in Trumpington, which is now a new ward of the trial? So is there any action happening, ward walks, for example, walkabouts? Is there anything that you could update us on? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll try and come back on those points. Councillor Dryden, in terms of work for community payback, I think if there's anything you feel that could be addressed beforehand, if you email James Maberley, who is your operations team leader for the South area, James will be able to sort of compile a list and see if we can, if we have any capacity for community payback to do that in the meantime. Obviously, any work around cutbacks is currently restricted due to the bird nesting season, but please email any information through to James that you'd like him to look at areas so that we've got, you know, we'll start planning probably around July time anyway for what needs to be done, so that the more information we get, you know, at the present time, it's really helpful for us to be able to put together a really good agenda for them to be able to get the most out of community payback whilst they're in the city. And they work with us for, I think it's maybe 5-6 days a week at the moment. So we have quite a lot of time that we could give them the work to do that where we identify it. So please do send that through to James. In terms of the covert cameras, we don't currently have any covert cameras in Cambridge. It is something that requires additional legal consideration because they are covert and they're not overt like our current cameras. So at the current time, there aren't any, but we always take away suggestions about what we could use to improve monitoring and trying to catch people that are responsible for fly tipping. So what I'll do is I'll take that away as an action point if I can and come back for a response about what we can and can't do in terms of the cameras, whether we're considering them, and if we're not, sort of why not, if that's okay. Councillor Davies, I'm not quite sure about the sort of the question around enforcement. It's obviously very wide ranging. I can't answer for sort of all of the enforcement teams. I think kind of from our the teams that I cover, which is obviously the community engagement team and the enforcement team, we do try to interact with as many residents groups as we possibly can. We do try to have officers on foot patrolling areas. I think that's very important for people to be seen in an area, particularly kind of like the, you know, Bobby on the beat sort of thing. I think it gives a more positive image dealing with the same people. So we do try to have people around, and we do speak to people. We have the same people who provide us intelligence and information about what's going on, particularly around sort of fly tipping hotspots, some of the dog control issues that we have. So we do have those contacts, but I mean, it's very difficult with enforcement because people often want something done, but they don't want to give us any information. They don't want to be the person naming someone as being responsible, and by law it's very difficult to do anything with hearsay. So unless someone is willing to stand up and give a statement, which is entirely a personal decision, we can't always take action against offenders, and it makes it very difficult because we can use their you know, their information as an anonymous report, but it does mean that we can't take certain action in certain cases. So I think all we can continue to do from my sort of team's areas is continue to nurture the relationships that we do have. I'm not quite sure, like you said, not sure what the best forum is to sort of take this forward, but I'm not quite sure that that's something that's kind of for me to necessarily answer, whether it's kind of something that needs to be raised at council wide. I'm not quite sure, but it's probably not a complete answer, but I kind of, that's what I think I can answer today. Councillor Ashton, in terms of Church End, Riley Way, we are well aware of the garages that cause the issues. I have advised Councillor Macpherson there are certain issues. So the first one is obviously parking on the double yellow lines, which the county council parking team enforce. We have asked them to take patrols and to include that in their patrol areas for their wardens. Abandoned vehicles, we encourage any abandoned vehicles to be reported. Any that we've investigated so far, I don't think we've removed any. Again, they have to meet the 4-week criteria before we can investigate them. Any sort of nuisance vehicles where they're kind of being repaired on the highway is an offence that we can deal with. So we have taken action against some of the businesses. I can't go into details about exactly what is going on because they're all ongoing cases, but it's very difficult to be able to take action without witness statements. And the issue we have in the Church End area is no one so far has been willing to give us a statement about what's happened, what they've seen. And without that, it's very much hearsay of I saw so-and-so repairing a car, I saw this happen, and we can't use that in any sort of formal action. So we have taken action as far as we can so far. you have Tony Derman and Jordan Hine as the officers for the area. They are well aware of the problems and they do patrol the area on a regular basis. We will respond to any intelligence we receive. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a one person responsible for the issue because there are so many different issues. I appreciate predominantly, it sounds like it's sort of caused by the businesses, that there isn't sort of one size fits all response, I'm afraid. All we can do is continue to try and tackle it as and when we get the evidence, the witness statements, or something happens that we can sort of witness ourselves. We'll continue to keep that on our radar of areas that we need to tackle. In terms of the grass cutting, I think, as you said already, Joel has identified there's not been any change in policy. That's kind of as much as I'm aware of as well. I think if there are any particular problems with grass cutting, again, I would refer you to James Maberley, your operations team leader. If you need to have a site meeting with him to discuss anything, he's the one that will know exactly what the grass cutting schedule is for all of the areas in your wards. I'm not even going to pretend to say I know what the grass cutting schedule is for the city because I don't. So I certainly would refer you on to James. He's very knowledgeable and very helpful. And I think if you need to ask questions about anything like that, particular to specific areas, do speak to him and he will be able to answer your questions. And then James, you asked about what a CPN was. So it's a community protection notice. It's a several stage approach that we have to follow. So if someone meets a certain legal test about causing undertaking behaviour or doing something that is persistent, ongoing, detrimental to the local amenity and unreasonable, we can issue what's called a community protection warning, which is a warning that tells them they should take actions to address their behaviour. That is not a formal notice at all. It's simply a warning telling them if they don't comply that we could issue what's called the CPN, the community protection notice. If that behaviour continues and doesn't improve or they don't address it, then they can be served a community protection notice requiring them by law to do certain things. If they don't comply with that, then they can be issued a fixed penalty every time they breach the notice, and they can end up in court. The CPN is very good for dealing with individual behaviours. So, for example, if someone doesn't control their dog and just opens the door and lets it go out and foul on the street and doesn't bother to clean it up, we can deal with that individual person and put specific measures in to ask them to deal with the problem. It doesn't necessarily deal with an area if there's a problem in. It's very much targeted on the individual. We use those for a lot of different reasons. We can use them for domestic waste issues where people can't manage waste, where people illegally advertise incorrectly or do sort of fly post to the city, and for dog control predominantly where people are not taking care of their dog in the way they should, not to do with welfare, but say straying, not picking up the fouling, if it's part of that kind of ongoing problem, and that's how we deal with it. Councillor Haug, instead of the herbicide-free trial, I'm afraid I don't have any update available that I can share with you. Alistair Wilson, I believe, is the main officer that will be able to share any updates. I'm not quite sure when the next committee report is due. I don't have anything at the current time I can provide, I'm afraid. I hope that's answered all the questions.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I mean, I think it did. I mean, there were lots of information in there. Is there anyone who still needs some more information, or are we happy? Because I think we've had quite a productive session here. So if that's not the case, can I just quickly ask James Goddard if anything's in the mailbox?
The Democratic Services mailbox is empty, Chair. No questions received.
I think in that case we are all satisfied. I mean, thank you so much, Wendy. That was a great session, and that brings us to the end. And also, of course, thank you to everybody who asked questions and made other contributions, which brings us to the end of the meeting. I think there is any other business item on my agenda, but I can still ask if there's anything anyone would like to say or ask at the end of the meeting. 3, 2, 1. No. Okay, thank you very much. I think that was a great South Area Committee meeting. The next meeting will be on the 4th of September.
Chair, please. You were too quick here.
There's always a last one.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
There has been a number of complaints about cycle crimes.
Yeah,
and I like actually a report from the police on this issue. There is also a need for a report on hate crime. So it would be very useful to have the police in our next meeting. I was actually, I had the time to look at the website, the council website for hate crimes. And I feel personally that it would be very useful to have the racial harassment team in our meeting to explain what kind of advice and work they do, because this is something that I wasn't aware, and I believe that most of the councillors are not aware of that.
Yes, I mean, the cycle theft was mentioned as matters arising already earlier when we talked about the minutes. So that will be the report by the police. So I can hear my echo now. Yeah, so that's been dealt with. And I can also ask the police, I mean, to talk about hate crime. And we can see what we can do about asking other officers to attend, of course, at future meetings, either the next one or some of the next ones, to report on other issues. So I can definitely take that on board.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. In that case, we can go offline. Thank you.